Now, overnight, news flow, and maybe we can put that quote up from Ukrainian President Zelensky, sounding much more open to the idea of settling the war in Russia, and those graphics will come up. This is a US brokered peace plan, and Zelensky not going on the offensive like he has in the past couple of years, saying we're going to fight to the end, and we got support from European countries who've been urging him to continue the fight, etc., etc. Much more conciliatory sounding Ukrainian President Zelensky. Remember, it's a war which has gone on for 3 years now, over 3 years now. G. Shivkumar is Executive Director and CFO at GE Shipping. Thanks very much, Mr. Shivkumar. Good to have you with us here. You know, we've discussed this many times in the past. How material is this? Something of a ceasefire coming into effect, if it can happen. I think there is a deadline this week, 27th, which of course seems to have been put in place by President Trump. Go on.
Morning, Prashant, and thanks for having me. Yeah, so we'll await whatever developments happen, and this is, of course, a fast-changing situation. The first impact of a ceasefire, and we'll have to see what impact it has on the tanker market. So if trade patterns go back to where they were 4 years ago, before the start of the war, then the first impact is a negative for the tanker markets, because we had between a 5 and 10% ton-mile bump as a result of the change in trade patterns. However, then that's a negative for the freight market. So that's a negative for earnings if it happens. However, you'll have to see whether trade patterns actually go back to where they were. And just to remind you, most of the trade was between Russia and Western Europe. So, and Western Europe was heavily dependent on Russian crude oil and Russian refined products, which changed after sanctions came in, so on and so forth, in 2022-23. So the question is whether it goes back to the earlier situation, or you have this disruption happening permanently. So that's really, while a ceasefire could happen, and that would be good, we don't know whether the trade patterns will actually go back to where they were in 2021 pre-war. And that's really the critical point for the tanker markets.
So 5 to 10% drop and negative for earnings, basically, immediately, right?
And when I say 5 to 10% drop, that's in ton-mile demand. And the impact on rates would be much, much, much higher. So just to give you an idea, 4 years ago, rates for tankers, whether it's product tankers or crude tankers, were between $10,000 and $15,000 a day. Today, the rate for crude tankers, which is, and let's say the mid and slightly larger size crude tankers, Aframax, Suezmax, are $50,000 a day. Okay, and that's the kind of impact a 5% difference in ton-mile demand can have. However, as I said, the caveat is that is if trade patterns go back to where they were before the war, which is a little unlikely in most analysts' opinions.
Okay. Wow, 10 to 15,000 pre the war starting. This is tanker and product, oil and crude and tanker product rates. Tanker rates basically for oil and product, and now 50,000.
That's right. For crude tankers, for product tankers, it's like $30,000 a day.
Wow.
So these little changes on the margin, 2 to 3% also makes a big difference on the margin, because the market is pretty tight. And, once that change happens, then it's anybody's guess what happens to rates.
And you said if the product purchase thing remains, if it goes back, basically, which is Western Europe starts to buy from Russia once again in a big way, only then all this will happen.
Will reverse. Yeah, that's right.
And
then you have the second order impact, which is there's a lot of ships which are actually still here, and the fleet is very old, the shipping tanker fleet. And a lot of the ships are only still carrying cargo, though they are overage, because the market is so hot, because you're making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a day. And if the market drops, then the next impact is for a lot of ships to get removed, which then brings the markets back into balance.
Yeah. What happens to, because, the product market has also been very tight, right? I think 7-8 days back, there was that refinery in Russia, which was a major attack. But I think supplies, etc., have resumed from the port nearest to it.
Yeah, but refining margins are very high, especially in Europe. So there is a shortage, especially of diesel. I think even US gasoline inventories are pretty low. So there is a shortage of refined product. So oil is, moving from wherever it's available, even if it's a long way away. So there is, and refining margins, high refining margins incentivize transportation of crude oil, transportation of refined products. So demand for tankers is really being driven by these refining margins and the amount of oil that's coming into the market, the crude oil which is being pushed into the market by OPEC.
Yeah. What kind of, what can happen if, do you have a view, because you're so closely associated here, these exceptionally high, margins, especially on diesel. Mm-hmm. If say there's a ceasefire or something, you think we can, what happens there?
Yeah, so you could have that Russian oil coming back in. You keep having these little disruptions from the attacks, the drone attacks on the Russian refineries, and that's what's taking out this capacity from time to time. We also have some refinery turnarounds happening in the Middle East, which is also resulting in more crude oil being exported out of the Middle East. And again, this happens in a cycle. You'll get those refineries coming back, and maybe you'll get margins coming off again because they're exceptionally high now. We're talking $35, $40 in Europe. So that should probably come down because they are unsustainably high. You can't have them this high for much longer. But the good thing is that it helps the tanker market.
Yeah, and what could be the kind of impact here? I mean, just like you did for the, is there a way to tell?
You mean on the tanker earnings?
No, not tanker. So diesel spot cracks, as you said, $30 a barrel, right? Yeah. What could happen to it? $30, $40, as you said.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's pretty high already. I don't know how much higher it could go. And again, we're not experts. We just say that, okay, this is high and that's what's driving the market and we enjoy it while.
No. I'm saying they could be, if there is more product into the market and Russian oil is back in the market in a big way, these cracks will compress. That's my point. Not about.
That's right.
So
that's right.
Could there be a substantial...
The impact would be that they would come down a little bit. That's right. Come down substantially. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Come down substantially. And you would expect all of this to play. Financial markets respond, as you know, quick and fast. But this is, the business of ships and routing and all of that stuff, right? So that takes time. But do you expect all of this? If there's a ceasefire announcement, we wake up to a ceasefire announcement, you think all of this will play out very fast?
First, the EU has to remove sanctions. The EU has to accept it. Then the consumer, so the German consumer, let's say, who was earlier importing a lot of crude oil from Russia, has to go back to importing crude oil from Russia rather than from the US or from Brazil or from West Africa. So all of that has to happen. And this is not as easy as signing a ceasefire or agreeing a ceasefire. So that will take some time. Yeah. That will take a bit of time to play out in the tanker market. Again, sentiment can change, but you need a lot of things to fall in place for trade patterns to go back to where they were before.
Got that. Now, just one last question, Mr. Shivkumar, and this is I'm moving away now from what the bulk of our conversation, actually all the conversation so far, which is this big push to the shipbuilding, make ships, at home here. Actually, a lot of countries are doing it. US is doing it. It is talking about it. What do you make of it, the push? It's
I think it's good to have a shipbuilding ecosystem, a shipbuilding and ship repair ecosystem, and a shipping ecosystem for that matter. As a large maritime country, we need to have a bigger shipping industry, which includes everything associated with shipping. So to that extent, we welcome it. It'll take time, obviously, to build this up, but you have to start sometime. And hopefully this can get built up into a big contributor. And so we are happy that shipping is on the radar of the government. As a big consumer of freight, as the Indian economy is, it's good to have a shipping fleet, an Indian shipping fleet.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's a critical sector in that sense. And China, by far the leader, right? In terms of the number of ships they make every year. Thank you very much, Mr. Shivkumar. And I hope we don't have to talk in the realm of possibility, and soon we can say, well, the war's ended and there's some semblance of peace in that part of the world. Thank you very much for joining us. Good speaking with you.